Steve and Josie are the top real estate agents in the city of Maxville, but they have a secret. They're the world's most powerful superhero couple. Steve's superhero name is Commander, and he has super strength. Josie's superhero name is Jetstream, and she can fly at supersonic speeds. They both graduated from the superhero high school called Sky High. They have a son named Will, and today is his first day of high school. The problem is, Will still hasn't shown any superpower, but Steve and Josie don't know that yet. So when Steve comes in, Will quickly pretends to lift heavy dumbbells in front of him. Just then, Will's childhood best friend Layla arrives and says hello to Josie. Layla has the power to control plants. Steve and Will then come into the kitchen and greet Layla. Just then, the mayor calls Steve with an emergency. A giant robot is attacking downtown. Steve and Josie immediately rush to the scene. As soon as they arrive, Jetstream throws Commander at the robot. Commander lands a single punch, and the giant robot is instantly defeated. Commander then pulls out one of the robot's eyes as a trophy. Meanwhile, the school bus arrives, and Ron, the bus driver, introduces himself. Once the bus picks up the last student, Ron pulls a switch that fastens everyone's seatbelts. He then drives straight toward an unfinished overpass and jumps off the edge. Everyone screams in fear, but instead of crashing, the bus quickly transforms into an aircraft and flies through the clouds. Later, they arrive at Sky High. Ron explains that the school is suspended in the air by anti-gravitational propulsion systems. After they land, Ron hands Will his business card. The freshmen are then greeted by two school bullies, Speed and Lash. Speed can run incredibly fast, while Lash can stretch his body like rubber. They claim to be part of the welcoming committee and ask the new students for money as some made-up fee. Just then, the student body president, Gwen, shoos the bullies away and officially welcomes the new students. Will immediately falls for her and becomes completely distracted by her beauty. As the new students enter the welcoming hall, a white ball of light suddenly appears and transforms into Principal Powers. She welcomes everyone and announces that the power placement test will begin shortly. She then transforms back into a white ball of light and leaves, while Coach Boomer takes over the test. He explains that each student will step onto the stage to demonstrate their superpower. Based on their abilities, he'll decide whether they belong in hero class or sidekick class. He then demonstrates his sonic scream and blows his whistle. The first student can transform into an indestructible stone giant. Boomer immediately assigns him to hero class. Next is Zach, who claims his whole body can glow, but he can't even demonstrate his power, so Boomer sends him to sidekick class. Next, Ethan transforms his body into liquid and is immediately assigned to sidekick class. The next student has 6 hands and is sent to hero class. Another student can transform into a ball and is sent to sidekick class. Then, a student with acid spit is assigned to hero class. The next student can shapeshift into anyone, so he's also sent to hero class. Then comes Magenta, who can shapeshift too, but only into a guinea pig, so she's sent to sidekick class. Now it's Layla's turn, but she refuses to show her power, arguing that no one should be labeled a hero or sidekick just because of their abilities. Boomer doesn't like her attitude and sends her straight to sidekick class. Just then, the lunch bell rings. During lunch, Will sits with the sidekicks and notices a boy glaring angrily at him. It turns out to be Warren. His mother is a superhero, while his father is a supervillain. Will's dad was the one who sent Warren's father to prison for life. That's why Warren hates Will. After lunch, the power placement test continues, and Boomer calls Will onto the stage. Will admits that he doesn't know what his superpower is. Thinking Will is joking, Boomer drops a car on him. Will insists he's telling the truth, but Boomer ignores him and activates a spring. Will is launched across the room and hurts himself. At this point, Boomer realizes Will really has no superpower and sends him to sidekick class. Will then visits a doctor who scans his entire body with her X-ray vision and confirms that he's fine, but Will wants to know when his power will finally appear. The doctor explains that despite having 2 superhero parents, Will has no superpower whatsoever. Just like the school bus driver Ron, disappointed Will returns home and plans to confess everything to his parents. But before he can say anything, Steve shows him family's secret room and warns him never to bring any strangers inside. Will promises he won't and follows him in. Inside, Steve reveals all the trophies he and Josie have collected over the years. One trophy immediately catches Will's attention, a gun called Pacifier, which belonged to a villain called Royal Pain. However, they don't realize that a hidden camera is inside the robot's eye. Royal Pain and his partner, Stitches, are secretly watching them. The next day, Will attends Mr. Boy's class, where he's trained how to assist the real heroes in the field. Will also learns that Mr. Boy was once Commander's sidekick. Later, Will and his friends are doing homework at his house when Commander arrives. Will introduces everyone to his father, but Steve looks unimpressed after learning that his friends have weak powers. Finally, Will gathers his courage and confesses that he and his friends are all sidekicks because he has no superpower. Steve assumes Will is just a late bloomer and tries to comfort him, but Will is tired of Steve constantly pushing him to become a superhero. So he says he loves being a sidekick and walks away. The next day at school, Will notices Lash and Speed happily bullying Ron. He steps in and stops them. During lunch, however, Lash and Speed decide to get back at Will. Lash stretches his hand across the room and grabs Will's leg, causing his lunch to spray all over Warren. Warren, who can control fire, erupts in anger and starts throwing fireballs at Will. Will desperately desperately tries to dodge them and runs toward the fire alarm, but Lash trips him again, sending him crashing to the floor. Will hides under a table while Layla, Magenta, Zach, and Ethan try to stand up for him. But Warren only gets more aggressive and starts attacking all of them. Just then, seeing his friends in danger, Will's super strength suddenly awakens. He grabs the table and throws it, sending Warren flying. But Warren isn't done yet. He charges at Will again, so Layla throws him a fire extinguisher. Will quickly puts out the flames and defeats Warren. Just then, Principal Powers arrives and takes them both to the detention room. Warren is still furious and tries to fight Will again, but his power doesn't work. Principal Powers explains that the detention room is designed to neutralize all superpowers. She scolds them both and leaves them alone to reflect on their actions. Will immediately tries to reach out to Warren, but Warren refuses and warns him that if he comes near him again, he'll destroy him. When Will gets home, he still can't control his newly gained power and accidentally destroys the door. Josie is mad about the school fight, but Steve is overjoyed. He celebrates Will finally getting his superpower by giving him an Xbox. Meanwhile, Royal Pain and Stitches discover that Will has the same super strength as his father. The next day, Will is transferred from Sidekick class to Hero class. He doesn't want to leave his friends behind, but they encourage him to move forward. In Hero class, Professor Medulla teaches them about different kinds of rays. He pairs Will with Gwen and assigns them a project to build a heat ray gun. Will is completely lost, but Gwen uses her technopathy power to construct the gun in seconds. Will is amazed by how easily she does it. Gwen then offers to tutor him privately, and Will immediately accepts. During lunch, Will sits with Gwen and her hero friends. He invites Layla and his sidekick friends to join them, but Penny quickly creates clones of herself and fills the entire table. With no room left, Layla and the other sidekicks have to sit at another table. Will feels terrible about what happened, so after lunch, he apologizes to Layla and asks her out to dinner. Just then, Will sees Lash and Speed bullying Ethan and Zach again. He steps in to stop them. Not willing to back down, the two bullies challenge Will to a practice fight called Save the Citizen, and Boomer agrees to referee the match. Lash and Speed choose to play the villains, while Will and Warren become the heroes. Boomer explains the rules. Will and Warren have 3 minutes to save the citizen. If they fail, Lash and Speed win. A dummy is then suspended above rotating saws and Boomer starts the match. Speed immediately zips toward Will and Warren at lightning speed, knocking them both to the ground. Furious, Will punches the floor, creating a shock wave that sends Lash and Speed flying. Will quickly grabs Lash and ties his stretchy body around a metal pole, leaving him unable to move. Meanwhile, Speed runs so fast around Warren that Warren struggles to breathe. With only 20 seconds left, Will grabs Speed by the neck and hurls him toward Lash, knocking them both down. Will then lifts Warren and throws him straight toward the dummy citizen. Just as the countdown reaches 0, Warren saves the citizen. Boomer announces that Will and Warren have won, and the entire arena erupts in applause. Will tries once again to befriend Warren, but Warren still shows no interest. That night, Gwen comes to Will's house to work on their science project. Steve and Josie immediately take a liking to her. Gwen then invites them to attend the upcoming homecoming dance as the guests of honor. Later, Steve and Josie show Will and Gwen their yearbook and talks about a girl named Sue Tenney, who suspiciously looks like Gwen. Back then, Sue turned into a supervillain and disappeared before graduation. Afterward, Will walks Gwen home. Out of nowhere, Gwen asks Will to be her date for the homecoming dance. Will happily accepts, and Gwen kisses him on the cheek. Overjoyed, Will completely forgets about his dinner date with Layla. She waits for him for hours until she meets Warren, who is working part-time at the restaurant. Warren tells Layla that he knows she's in love with Will and advises her to ask Will to be her homecoming date. Meanwhile, Royal Pain makes a plan to steal back the pacifier weapon. He also plans to attack Sky High on homecoming night. The next morning, Will suddenly remembers his dinner date with Layla. He says sorry, but excitedly tells her that he's going to homecoming with Gwen. Layla is immediately heartbroken. From then on, Gwen tries to keep Will from contacting Layla and his sidekick friends, while Layla pretends to be in a relationship with Warren to make Will jealous. One night, while Will's parents are away, Gwen convinces him to throw a party for her hero friends. Soon, the house is filled with superhero teens, but Will doesn't feel like they're really his friends. So he tells Gwen he wants to invite Layla and the other sidekicks too. Gwen says making friends with sidekicks is wrong. Then to distract him, she says she wants to be alone with him somewhere. Will breaks his promise to his father and takes Gwen to the family secret room. Out of nowhere, she kisses him. But it's only a distraction. Speed quickly steals the pacifier weapon and escapes. Meanwhile, Layla passes by Will's house and hears loud music, so she decides to check inside. Gwen immediately notices her and sends Will to get some drinks. Then, Gwen lies to Layla that Will knows she loves him, but he doesn't want to be with a sidekick. Furious, Layla walks away. Will sees her and says hello, but Layla completely ignores him. Will immediately confronts Gwen, and she explains what happened. Furious, Will dumps her on the spot and says he's no longer going to homecoming with her. Before Gwen can respond, Commander and Jetstream arrive, forcing everyone to quickly run away. The family then has a huge fight. Later, Will says he isn't going to homecoming and goes to his room. He calls Layla, but she doesn't answer after. Will leaves several voicemails before going to the restaurant to wait for her. There, he meets Warren and finally learns the truth. The next night, Josie urges Will to go to homecoming, but he still refuses. Sitting at home, he flips through his dad's yearbook and notices a photo of Sue Tenney holding the pacifier weapon. Suddenly, Will realizes Gwen is actually Royal Pain's daughter and immediately calls Ron for help. Meanwhile, the homecoming at Sky High has already begun. Gwen warmly welcomes the guests of honor, Steve and Josie, before revealing that she is Royal Pain. Everyone always thought Royal Pain was a man, but Gwen explains that she used a voice changer inside her villain suit. Just then, Stitches arrives and hands her the pacifier weapon. Gwen immediately uses it to turn Steve, Josie, and everyone else into children. Everyone tries to escape, but Lash, Speed, Penny, and her clones block all the exits. Meanwhile, Warren blasts open a vent, allowing him, Layla, and the other sidekicks to escape. At the same time, Ron and Will arrive at Sky High. Inside the dark vent, Zack uses his power to make his entire body glow and light the way. Will sees the light coming from inside the vent, so he rips open the opening and rescues his friends. Will apologizes to everyone and they forgive him. He then kisses Layla. Just then, Penny, Lash, and Speed arrive. Will immediately rushes toward Gwen, while Magenta and Zack escape through the vent again. Lash grabs Ethan and tries to punch him, but Ethan quickly transforms into liquid and escapes into the bathroom. Lash follows him and checks every stall. While Lash is distracted, Ethan suddenly appears behind him and dunks his head into the toilet bowl. Outside, Speed is fighting Warren. Ethan then comes out of the bathroom and turns into liquid when he sees Speed. Speed steps on liquid Ethan and slips. Warren takes the opportunity to throw a fireball at Speed and takes him down. Meanwhile, Penny charges at Layla with her clones and starts punching her. Furious, Layla unleashes her full power and traps Penny and her clones with tree branches. Terrified, Penny admits that Royal Pain has sabotaged the anti-gravity system and the entire school is about to fall out of the sky. Outside, Gwen and Stitches are loading the baby superheroes onto a school bus. Will arrives and confronts Gwen, but then he discovers Gwen isn't Royal Pain's daughter. Gwen is Royal Pain. After Commander defeated Royal Pain, the pacifier weapon exploded. Everyone thought Royal Pain had died, but the pacifier ray accidentally hit her and turned her into a baby. Since then, Stitches has raised her as his own daughter. Suddenly, Royal Pain charges at Will and flies him through the walls. Will fights back and throws her around, but her powerful armor easily overpowers him. Meanwhile, Layla and the other sidekicks are trying to figure out how to stop the school from falling. They find a pipe connected to the anti-gravity room, and Magenta transforms into a guinea pig to reach the room. At the same time, Will throws Royal Pain into a disco ball to electrocute her. When she falls to the ground, Will raises his hand to finish her. Just then, Layla and Warren arrive and distract him for a moment. Royal Pain activates her suit, punches Will out of the school, and sends him falling through the clouds. Layla is devastated, but suddenly, Will flies back inside, revealing that his flying power has awakened too. Will grabs Royal Pain and carries her up to the ceiling. He then drops her to the floor and destroys her mask. While Will, Layla, and Warren celebrate, Royal Pain shuts down the anti-gravity system. Sky High immediately begins plummeting toward the ground. Will flies down and uses all his strength to push the school away from the ground. At the same time, Magenta reaches the anti-gravity room and cuts a wire. Instantly, the anti-gravity system reactivates and Sky High safely floats back into the sky. Meanwhile, Stitches tries to escape with the baby superheroes, but Ron kicks him out. Luckily, Professor Medulla uses his genius mind to reverse the pacifier weapon and restores everyone to their original bodies and ages. With their evil plan completely foiled, Principal Powers locks Royal Pain and her allies in the detention room. Steve and Josie thank Will and his friends for saving everyone. Finally, Professor Medulla announces that the party is back on, and everyone happily starts celebrating again. Sometime later, Royal Pain and her allies are given life sentences. Ron falls into toxic waste and becomes a superhero. He now works for the mayor, defending the city from giant robots. Will, Layla, Warren, Ethan, Magenta, and Zack become the best superhero team in the world.